Shalom, shalom, shalom. Shalom. Welcome to the Genesis 49ers page. We are live. I just wanted to make a quick video touching on the Black and Latin community, the Black and Hispanic community, because there's been a lot of propaganda regarding George Lopez and Latinos hating Negroes and Negroes hating Latinos, and you got some Negro false pseudo leaders claiming that we shouldn't, join with our Latino brothers, or you got some Latinos that may feel the same about Negroes, but we here to separate that. We're going to go over the history because my channel is based off of going over historical archives and bringing our ancestry to the light. Okay. So I have a few articles. After the video is done, I'm going to post a link to both articles within the description of the video. As you can see on your screen, we have from the LatinoRebels.com a topic, solidarity, a brief accounts of Black and Latino unity from the late 1800s to the present. So I'm not going to just give you, my opinion or my outlook of it. I'm going to give you what history says about it. And this article was put together by a Hispanic brother, I believe, and he did a very fantastic job. Yeah, Carlos Martinez. So we're going to dive into this information and learn about a few instances where Black and Latinos got together for a common cause. It says the late 1800s, Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, born in Santurce, Puerto Rico, I probably butchered that, I'm still learning Spanish, was a prominent figure during the Harlem Renaissance. He moved to Harlem in 1891 at the young age of 17. Schomburg was a self-proclaimed Afro-Boricano who later helped found the Negro Society for Historical Research, known today as one of the fathers of what we call African-American Africana studies. Schomburg was also dedicated to a different major cause of his time, the liberation of Cuba and Puerto Rico from the grips of Spain. And you can see his picture right there. New York City was an immigrant enclave for Cubans, Puerto Ricans, and other Caribbean political leaders during the late 1800s. Iconic names like Martí, Hostos, Maceo, Batance all made stops in the city to coordinate revolutionary actions in the islands. In similar traditions, Arturo Alfonso Schomburg joined organizations such as the José Martí affiliated Las Dos Antillas and became a member of the Comité Revolucionario de Puerto Rico. He also found brotherhood as a Freemason by joining El Sol de Cuba Lodge number 38. The lodge was unique because they conducted all business in Spanish, founded under the African American institution of Prince Hall Masonry. El Sol de Cuba became a place where Latinos could organize in New York. And we all know Prince Hall is the beginning of the African Masonic Lodge. And you also had that within the Latin community. As you can see, the El Sol de Cuba Lodge número 38. Okay, it says El Sol de Cuba became a place where Latinos could organize in New York. Forced segregation would often mean the white and black Latinos didn't live near each other. I'm going to read that again. It says forced segregation. So this was forced upon some people. A lot of people don't understand. We were taught to be colorists within our communities. This was pushed on us by white supremacists, the school system. Okay, our oppressors pushed that on us. All right, understand that. The diaspora was integrated into the fabric of American racial politics, but this lodge helped members connect with other American blacks while promoting community service. So this lodge connected the Latinos with the American Negroes. Understand that. Afro-Latino history, American blacks while promoting community service, independent politics, Afro-Latino history, and other endeavors they saw fit as a group. Internal records show that brother Masons, including Martí, visited from nearly every republic in South America at some point during the Spanish-speaking era of the lodge's history. Schomburg and other Afro-Latinos chose to organize themselves within some of the established Black American organizations in a very intentional manner. America has long been a nation that does not fully value the humanity of Black people. It's likely that this reality was made clear to immigrants of color. El Sol de Cuba is an example where Latino immigrants actively worked to break down some of the barriers presented by the new country they call home. They found in Black American and West Indian communities other marginalized groups that face similar challenges, and that's what we're here to do. That's what the Israelites are here to do. We're here to break down these walls of partition, these barriers that keep Black and Latin people together. And that main barrier is this colorist, scientific, racist attitude, the fascist attitude that was put on us, that we learned, and what we learned through the media, through the school systems, through everyday life, through commercials, through songs. We learned this, and we're here to break all that away from us, because after years and years of learning that has torn us away from each other. Okay? So, continuing on, it says, they found in Black American West Indian communities other marginalized groups that face similar challenges. These collaborations and associations will continue throughout the decades at different levels across the country. Black and Latino communities often cross paths as the marginalized groups in their cities and townships. Some Latinos who could pass will racially socialize as white in their communities. This would play a key role in their interaction with Black people around them. Still, Latino and Black populations became victims of public lynchings. I want you to hear this. Public lynchings. So lynchings is not just a Black thing like they advertise on TV or if you watch a slave movie. This disfranchisement, discrimination, okay, like you have the famous sign that says no Negroes, no Mexicans, and no dogs. And other established practices reserved for the non-white people of America, okay? Going down, the Civil Rights era. We're moving from the 1800s to the Civil Rights era. During the Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 1960s, we find a documented period of unity between Blacks and Latinos. Chicano civil rights leader Reyes Lopez Tijerina held private meetings with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad from the Nation of Islam concerning commonalities in their movements. Cuban leader Fidel Castro chose to stay in Harlem and met with Malcolm X during one of his visits to New York. Cesar Chavez openly spoke about learning from other movements, areas of strength. King was also a Chavez supporter. As quote, as brother in the fight for equality, I stand in hand of fellowship and goodwill and wish continuous success to you and your members. You and your violent fellow workers have demonstrated your commitment to righting grievous wrongs forced upon exploited people. We are together with you in spirit and in determination that our dreams for a better tomorrow will be realized. MLK to Chavez, September 1966, end quote. Organizations like the Young Lords, mostly Puerto Rican, and the Brown Berets, mostly Chicano, would both join Fred Hampton's Black Panthers Rainbow Coalition of radical grassroots organization. They organized within their communities and then joined forces at points of common interest. As you can see, a picture exemplifying what was just read. Okay, the Black Panthers joining with these Hispanic Chicano groups. There was a growing awareness amongst Black and Latino civil rights leaders that the communities had much in common as part of a marginalized and oppressed communities within the country. A key example was the historic 1967 meeting called together by Lopez Tijerina during the annual meeting of the Alianza Federal de Pueblos Libres. Representatives from major Black and Chicano civil rights organizations convened to discuss a unity agenda. Notable names including the U.S. organization Black Panther Party, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Mexican American Youth Organization, and Crusade for Justice. Even the Hopi Nation sent a representative, which is the Hopi Nation is Native American. Bilingual meetings where streams of Black power, Chicano power, and Puerto Negro could be heard. Speeches critiqued white supremacy and detailed a need for basic unity in their common struggle for civil and human rights. And that's where we're at now. We need to come as one body, as one people. Blacks, Hispanics need to come together. We need to stop being separate and doing our own thing and trying to think. And for some reason, we think we can do it all by ourselves. No, we need each other as a nation. Blacks and Hispanics, which we are. But see, black is not really a race. And Hispanics not really a race. We're all under one banner, all under one creed, and all under one race. Okay? And that race is Israelite, Israelita, in the Spanish. We are the same people. And we need to stand for each other. Okay? It says, ultimately, the crossing gathering resulted in the signing of an agreement of an agreement titled the Treaty of Peace, Harmony, and Mutual Assistance. We need to bring stuff like this back into play, back into effect within our communities to bring us together. I believe that we need to have centers where you teaching quote unquote American Black Spanish, and we can learn how to blend culturally. Because a lot of the disagreements we have is because we are the same people, but one has been colonized, been taught on the Spanish colonial Spain, okay, and the other has been, forced to stay here in America and being Americanized or Europeanized, by the British, okay? So we learn different things from them, and we're fighting over their cultures that they put on us, okay? But we're actually a lot similar once we shed those different cultures off of us and come back to our ancestral essence, okay? So it says, an agreement between all represented black and brown organizations where groups agreed to respect each of the separate movements and work together when possible. Leaders understood that division existed between the communities. One line from said treaty states that both people do promise not to permit the members of either of said peoples to make false propaganda of any kind whatsoever against each other, either by speech or writing. And that's what you're seeing on YouTube. False propaganda, okay? You got black people saying all Mexicans hate black people. That's not true. That's false propaganda. We had a treaty with each other that forbade that type of thing, but now we just do it. We practice destructive behavior amongst each other, amongst our own, within the black community and within the Latino community. We don't have that much time. We have been oppressed and destroyed people for about 500 years now, okay? We don't have time to sit here and bicker and destroy us because what a comedian did on the stage. This is all because of what George Lopez said, okay? Do you know how many jokes black people themselves have with their own community down in their own selves? How many jokes Latinos have in their own community down in their own selves? We need to get away from that type of thinking and come back to something that's more constructive and conducive for us to grow as an entity so we can make moves, so we can be independent and deal with our own, grow our own food, our own businesses, and start circulating that dollar and create an economy, okay? We need each other for that. Have our own schools, okay? So we need to have a consensus. The leaders need to get together, and we need to all come on one common faith and one common basis that we need to know that we have to get together and destroy all these walls that keep us separate so we can move as one unit. We'll be more powerful that way. It says another explains that both peoples make a solemn promise to cure and remedy the historical errors and differences that exist between said peoples. This was in that writing. They were way advanced than where we are now, back in the 60s. They was trying to correct this issue back then, which has gotten worse since then. So that's our duty. We have to take these walls that separate us, and stop trying to go with what's popular. It's just popular to say that Hispanics don't like black people. You understand? And vice versa. We have to get rid of this colorism. Okay, we're the same people. And we have to teach the history. Like I said, Genesis 49ers, we're dedicated to historical clarity. We're going to bring out the history of the people, the ancient history of the Indios, okay? They were regarded as Negroes too. Y'all don't understand that. But moving on, it says over time, most of the major civil rights organizations lost influence due to, in no small part, a concerted effort by the American government. Programs like COINTELPRO would lead to the assassination or imprisonment of leaders, and propaganda was spread to discredit many of the organizations. Nevertheless, Black and Latino communities were able to gain victories with their efforts. Now, COINTELPRO stopped this. Why? Because what J. Edgar Hoover said, he did not want to bring forth the he wanted to stop the Black Messiah from coming. Okay, which a lot of people say he believed it was Malcolm X. And all these other groups was coming together and bringing the Black and Latino community together. This is what they feared. This is what they was against. This is why they didn't let this transpire. They knew the Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans were coming together. Okay? And you got people on the YouTube pushing that white supremacy, pushing that blacks should be, just forget about the Hispanics because of what a comedian said. You see what I'm saying? This is how COINTEL is allowed today, man. Nobody cannot tell me that COINTEL. No one can tell me that COINTEL does not exist today. COINTEL still exists. There's a picture here. It's Angela Davis, Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, Ernesto Vigil at Loretta Heights College in Denver, Colorado in April 28, 1973, photo Pablo Castro. Okay, the rise of hip-hop. In 1970 and 1980s, we begin to see the rise of hip-hop. The children of the civil rights movement in New York City were still marginalized and living in close proximity to each other. Organically, the social political culture began to rise amongst the youth. It was a way of life that included rappers, DJs, breakdancers, and graffiti artists. Blacks and Latinos were both key parts that created this new expression of a unique lived reality. Rapper Q-Tip broke it down in an excellent Quitter history lesson when he wrote, "But during these strides, this country still had the monster of racism and racial insensitivity breeding and ruling. Believe it or not, young Black and Latino lives specifically weren't acknowledged in mainstream American culture unless, of course, the convo was about gangs, being criminals, or uneducated. And hey, like I stated earlier, our families were rushed, our schools sucked, and we were left to put devices to survive. But hip-hop showed that we had depth, fire, and brilliance. The music was undeniable. It moved from NY and became national and even global. Hip-hop artists have a long history of calling for the unity between Black and Brown in this country. Artists Fat Joe and Ice Cube have also explained their perspective on this topic. Quote, "A lot of Latinos are influenced by me, and I try to show them that there's no difference between Black and Latinos. In any area you find a large amount of Black people, you find a large amount of Latinos. If we learn to get together and become one, we can become a majority." That's what a lot of people don't understand. Fat Joe understands that. He understood that. Okay, a rapper understands that. But you get these pseudo leaders on YouTube, you know, Afrocentric or just overly Afrocentric, or or Latinos that don't want to deal with. You get these people and they push for us to be separate, but not knowing we're stronger together. If we learn to get together and become one, we become a majority. We could become at least much stronger. We could unify. We could express our issues and what we are concerned with in our community, and they have to listen to us because us together as one form a large number of voters, so we demand our respect. And that's Fat Joe, end quote there of that one. And another quote from Ice Cube, "My thing is the Black and Brown have always shared California." I think it sounds silly to be trying to kick people out who've been here before America. And that's the whole thing. These people been here. That don't make no sense. I just think people should figure out a way to include these people into our society. They're already here, and let's make it happen. I think it'll be better for everybody. And that's Ice Cube. Music speaks to the soul of a large segment of young people today. Hip-hop has served as cultural ties between Black and Latinos since its inception as a cultural and way of life. Language is no barrier. Legendary groups like Public Enemy performing in places like Brazil and Spanish hip-hop or reggaeton collaborations with U.S. artists in growing numbers demonstrate that hip-hop will continue to serve as a point of unity. So now we're going to go to the present day of the article. It is possible to find expressions of Black and Latino solidarity today. Texas LULAC and NAACP groups work together, fighting racist textbook standards for students in 2010. Across the nation, there are grassroots efforts with Latino and Black organizations working together to combat diverse issues, including voter disenfranchisement, healthcare, and police brutality. There are countless issues where challenges both communities face intersect. It is at these points that an effort could be made to work together. Organizing has resulted in the unique position of Blacks and Latinos in America to be acknowledged by the United Nations Committee Against Torture. The committee is particularly concerned at the reported current police violence in Chicago, especially against African American and Latino young people who are allegedly being consistently profiled, harassed, and subjected to excessive force by Chicago Police Department CPD officers. It also expresses its deep concern at the frequent and recurrent police shootings or fatal pursuits of unarmed Black individuals. In this regard, the committee notes that alleged difficulties to hold police officers and their employers accountable for abuses. The growing movement against police brutality and use of excessive force is that of opportunity. Latinos and Blacks both face disproportionate rates of incarnation and racial profiling, and awareness of these livid realities are slowly but surely creeping into the mainstream consciousness of America and embracing the banner of Black Lives Matter. It's that type of opportunity. It will never mean Latino life or any other life matters any less. This is a chance to stand in solidarity with African Americans who have brought the issue to the front door of America. Another point in history of cross-cultural relations, a chance for the Latino community to show the significant portion of Afro-Latinos that their lives matter. There are plenty of instances where two communities have been at odds. Those who prefer separation will focus on those occasions. Others will choose to walk in the tradition of King, Chavez, Malcolm, and Reyes. Solidarity is best way forward. Unity is a tool that helps both groups progress. Where would you stand in history? And you can see Carlo Martinez is a counselor, writer, and higher education professional. He's the creator of Carlo Thinks. You can follow Carlos at his Twitter at KACIKE1931. That's him right there. He's the one who brought the article to light, wrote the article, and basically, bringing forth these truths that need to be spoken, talked about. No one's talking about this. I searched YouTube today, and I was just looking for an article or a video of someone bringing up our past and our history of Black and Latino relationships on the positive end. They always want to talk about, Latinos hate each other. You know what I'm saying? Instead of trying to bring out what's going to make us connect and make us bond. Okay, this is the information our people need to hear. This is the education and edification, meaning the building that we need. Okay? Instead of pushing this white supremacy, pushing all these things, these edifices and things that were taught and devices that were taught to keep us torn and separated and tore our bands asunder, like the scriptures say, as a people. Okay, and again, the title, Solidarity, Brief Accounts of Black and Latino Unity from the late 1800s to present. Okay? And we're not going to let it die. We're going to bring our people together if it kills us. Understand that. And during the 60s, like we read, the government feared all these groups coming together. The Hopi Nation, okay, the Brown Berets, okay, the Black Panther Party, all coming as one unit, one entity. They feared that. And that's what they still fear. They fear the nation of Israel to come back as one. Understand that. I got one more article to bring up. And like I said, at the end of the video, I will be posting the link to both these articles. This is on globalresearch.ca. And it says, Mexico welcome fugitive slaves and African-American job seekers. Because the statement was made on one of these pseudo leaders on one of these YouTube pages where they want to spread false propaganda that what has Mexicans ever did for Black people or have they ever? Man, you don't know the history, okay? The relationship with Latinos and blacks runs deep. But let's get into the article. It says a new perspective on the immigration debate. This was made in the 4th of May, 2006 by Ron Wilkins. In 1829, excuse me, Afro-Mexican president, that's correct, Afro-Mexican, he was a black president, President Vicente Guerrero, signed a decree banning slavery in the Mexican Republic. There are, of course, many angles from which to view the escalating immigration debate. Mexican immigrants, who constitute the largest share of the undocumented, have a unique history with the African population inside the United States. As a black community weighs in on this very contentious issue, it becomes necessary for us, both black and brown, to review the history that we share. However, before reviewing our history together, I need to say unequivocally that the U.S. seizure of more than half of Mexico's territory in 1848 netted Washington more than 80% of Mexico's fertile land and was a criminal act, and that if Mexico today still included California and Texas, she would possess more oil than Saudi Arabia and have sufficient economic infrastructure to employ all of her people. When Mexican people... Oh, wait, hold on. I got a sidebar on that. It says she would possess more oil than Saudi Arabia, and have sufficient economic infrastructure to employ all of her people. So the problem is Mexicans come here for work and for economical purposes. They make good money. But if America never took those lands, what this is essentially stating is it never took this land, they wouldn't have to cross a border to get work and make money, because they took the part of the land where they could make that money, where their economic prowess would be available to them. Okay, understand that. It's a hypocritical nation we live in, which is Babylon the Great. But that's another topic. Let's keep going. When Mexican people say that the border crossed us, we did not cross the border, they speak the truth. And more black people, most of whom are not strangers to oppression, exploitation, domination, and exclusion, need to appreciate that. It has been said that for the most of the 19th century, Mexican immigrants were more highly regarded by African Americans than any other immigrant group. What may account for this, at least in part, is the enormous, if not pivotal, role undertaken by black fighters in the war to secure Mexican independence from Spain and abolish slavery. Unfortunately, many of us repeat the falsehoods of our adversaries and have forgotten our special relationship with Mexican indigenous peoples. And that's what a lot of people, that's where we are today in 2017. This was written in 2006. A decade later, we still had this issue. You spread the propaganda and the falsehood of the media about Mexicans. Oh, they're taking all our jobs. No, America took the jobs from Mexico. How about that? Stop repeating what you see on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News. Okay? America takes everything from us and then blame us for it. But continuing on, we have, like I brought out earlier, we have a special relationship, just like the article says, with Mexican and indigenous people. Negroes do. It is time that our memories be restored and that the naysayers and nativist Negroes among us either put up or shut up. That's how I am. Put up, provide the proof and evidence, or just be quiet. What follows is little known history of Mexico serving as a refugee for fugitive slaves and a provider of job opportunities for blacks immigrating from U.S. to Mexico. The Native Youth Movement, including the rap group War Club, was with the POCC, including LAPOCC member Jazz, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., and POCC artist Jocelyn backstage at the We the People Festival in Watts on April 8th. The event was a huge success in bringing young black and brown people together. The photo is supposed to be a picture here. JR Mexico as a haven for fugitive slaves. From the very beginning of his Texas colonization scheme, a determined and deceitful Stephen Austin, we all know who this is, the capital of Texas named after him, sought to have Mexican officials acquiesce to the settlement of slave-owning whites into the territory. Acquiesce just means just be quiet about it and just agree. It was generally acknowledged that the people and government of Mexico abhorred slavery and were determined to prohibit its practice within the Mexican Republic, which included Texas. Beginning in 1822, at least 20,000 Anglos, many with their slave property, settled in Texas. Jared Grosse, one of the first of Stephen Austin, Texas settlers that year, arrived with 90 enslaved Africans. The Mexican federal law of July 13, 1824 clearly favored and promoted the emancipation of slaves. Mexico had even stipulated that it was prepared to compensate North American owners of fugitive slaves. Determined instead to have things their way, Anglos began to press for an extradition treaty which would require Mexico to return fugitive slaves. So the Mexican government was like, look, we will pay you for these slaves so we'll buy their freedom. They didn't want to do it. The same, when you read the Bible and you read Exodus, right? The same thing. They don't want to Pharaoh didn't want to let children of Israel go. Moses and Aaron had to beg for Pharaoh to let them go. The Mexican government tried to compensate the slave owners for the freedom of the slaves, and they did not want to hear it. Okay? Nothing new under the sun. Let's just continue. From 1825 until the end of the Civil War in 1865, Mexican authorities continuously thwarted attempts by slaveholding Texas settlers to conclude fugitive slave extradition treaties between the two parties. During this period of extremely tense relations between the two governments, Mexico consistently repudiated and forbade the institution of slavery in its territory, while U.S. officials and Texas slave owners continuously sought ways to circumvent Mexican law. The Mexican authorities thwarted repeated attempts by slaveholding Texas settlers to conclude fugitive slave extradition treaties between the two parties. In 1826, the Committee of Foreign Relations of the Mexican Chamber of Deputies refused to compromise on the issue of fugitive slaves and defended the right of enslaved Africans to liberate themselves. Mexican government officials cited the inalienable right which the author of nature has conceded to him, meaning enslaved persons. Congress member Erasmo Seguin from Texas commented that the Congress was resolved to decree the perpetual extinction in the Republic of commerce and traffic in slaves, and that their introduction into our territory should not be permitted under any pretext. So Mexico was vocal about it. They was passing laws and they was letting them know that slavery cannot go down in our provinces within our jurisdiction. Following on. Again, in October 1828, the Mexican Senate rejected 14 articles of a newly proposed treaty and harshly criticized Article 33, stating, "It would be most extraordinary that in the treaty between two free republics, slavery should be encouraged by obliging ours to deliver up fugitive slaves to their merciless and barbarous masters of North America." Reporting on the growing number of Anglo settlers in Texas, Mexican General Turan reported, "Most of them have slaves, and these slaves are beginning to learn the favorable intent of Mexican law to their unfortunate condition and are becoming restless under their yokes." General Turan went on to describe the cruelty meted out by the masters to restless slaves. They extract their teeth, set on the dogs to tear them in pieces, the most lenient being he who but flogged his slaves until they are flayed. So they were punishing the slaves because the slaves knew about the Mexican government and their laws and how the laws were there put in place to help them. Okay, so you can clearly, when you look throughout the annals of history, you can clearly see who the devil is. A lot of people are scared to say that. Oh, who's the devil? Who's the devil? We know who they are. Okay. Well, you can clearly see. Just read the history. Turn on the news. Okay, let's read on. On September 15, 1829, Afro-Mexican President Vicente Guerrero signed a decree banning slavery in the Mexican Republic. Yielding to appeals from the panicked settlers and Mexican collaborators who saw Mexico benefiting economically from the Anglo presence, Guerrero exempted Texas from the prohibition on the introduction of slaves into the Republic. On December 2nd, several months later, the Mexican government severely restricted Anglo immigration and banned the introduction of slaves into the Republic. So immigration, the immigrants, the real immigrants of Texas, my bad, are the Caucasians that were coming in, okay, at this time, trying to come into Texas and trying to impose their will on the Mexican Republic and force them to accept the slavery, which was already abolished in Mexico. They were the immigrants. Let's read on. Undeterred, the Anglos secede. That's the thing. Let me just stop. I'm sorry. I know this is getting long, but that's the thing. They'll sit here and try to call Mexicans or the indigenous people illegal aliens and thugs and criminals, and you guys don't remember the history of how y'all annexed Texas? The history of the history of how they annexed Texas is immigration. Okay? It's due to illegal aliens because Mexico passed laws to ban them and restrict the Anglo immigration. They came in, imposed their own will, and fought against the Mexican government and warred against the Mexican government. But they want to talk about, man, give me a break. Undeterred, the Anglos succeeded in negotiating a new treaty in Mexico in 1831, which included Article 34, which called for pursuit and reclamation of fugitive slaves. After considerable wrangling between the Mexican Chamber of Deputies and Senate, Article 34 was removed from the treaty. Also, by 1831, it became apparent through debate within the Mexican Senate that the government's welcoming of fugitive slaves was not completely altruistic. Some Mexican officials, fearful of U.S. military intervention, had begun to see it was wise to encourage the development of a runaway slave colonies along the northern border as a way to lessen the threat posed by the U.S. As historian Rosalie Swartz put it, many Mexican officials reasoned these fugitives choosing between liberty under the Mexican government and bondage in the United States will fight to protect their Mexican freedom more vigorously than any mercenary. So he's saying that the slaves themselves will fight for themselves for their freedom on the frontiers. As the entrance of Mexican officials and U.S. abolitionists coincided during the early 1830s, a modest number of former slaves established themselves in Texas and fared well during the period. In 1836, and what are we bringing out? How the Mexican government, how Mexicans helped the quote-unquote African Americans. In 1836, after the fall of the Alamo and its slave-owning or pro-slavery leaders such as William Travis, Jim Bowie, and Davy Crockett, Mexican forces were defeated and an independent Texas was eventually annexed by the United States. However, before the expulsion of Mexican forces from Texas, Brig General Jose Urrea evicted scores of illegally settled plantation owners, liberated slaves, and in many instances granted them on the spot titles to the land they had worked. Let me read that again, because people say, oh, Mexicans ain't never did nothing for Negroes. Let me read that again. General Jose Urrea evicted scores of illegally settled plantation owners. I mean, he got rid of the slave master, liberated slaves, freed the slaves, and in many instances granted them on the spot titles to the land they had worked. So don't tell me that no Mexican or they ain't never did nothing. Come on, bro. We got to know the history. That's false propaganda you pushing. And the person who said that is supposed to be a doctor. But anywho, let's continue on. Oddly enough, many black people call for 40 acres and a mule, a reference to Union General Sherman's Special Field Order 15 and Junior Howard's Circular 13, which made some land available to former slaves. But what one never hears are references to Mexican General Jose Urrea and the land titles that he and his men granted to former Texas slaves following the defeat of the Alamo a generation before the Civil War. Why we never hear this? Because stuff like this will bring us together. Stuff like this will make us band. We'll become cohesive. But we don't hear about that. We hear about, Mexican cartel may be the reason for all of the black deaths in Chicago. Because that right there is what's going to separate us and make us fight amongst each other. But hearing stuff like this is going to plant the seed and grow into something greater. This is why, again, the last article brought up how the COINTELPRO got involved in disbanding all those groups, the Hopi Nation, the Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, okay? Same thing going on in 2017. Let me read on. It says, even after the loss of Texas, Mexican officials refused to formally acknowledge Texas independence on the grounds that it would be equivalent to the sanction and recognition of slavery. After Texas independence, the slave population mushroomed and it got bigger, and the number of the runaways across the South Texas North Mexican border increased. In 1842, Mexico's Constitutional Congress reasserted the nation's commitment to fugitive slaves. In 1847, 38,753 slaves and 102,961 whites were listed in the first official Texas census. In 1850, in a new treaty accord with the United States, Mexico again refused to provide for the return of fugitive slaves. So the Mexican government will refuse to give up the slaves. Okay? They granted amnesty. They let them stay. They had their own places to live. They had freedom. Okay? Learn about the Seminoles when they went to Mexico. But that's for another topic. The Black Seminoles. But let's continue on. Plantation owners in Central Texas adopted various resolutions aimed at preventing Mexicans from aiding the slave population. Whites in Guadalupe County prohibited Mexican peons from entering the county and anyone from conducting business or interacting with enslaved persons without authorization from the owners. Bexar County whites suggested that Mexican strangers entering from San Antonio register at the mayor's office and give an account of themselves and their business. Delegates to a convention in Gonzales resolved that counties should organize vigilance committees to prosecute persons tampering with slaves, and that all citizens and slaveholders were to endeavor to prevent Mexicans from communicating with blacks. And that's what they're doing now. They're trying to prevent us from communicating with each other. They don't want us to be together. But at this time, they didn't want the Mexicans to communicate with the blacks because the Mexicans were trying to free them. Whites in Austin decreed that all transient Mexicans should be warned to leave within 10 days, that all remaining should be forcibly expelled unless their good character and good behavior were substantiated by responsible American citizens, meaning bow down to white supremacy. That's the translation of that. And that Mexicans should no longer be employed in their presence in the area should be discouraged. In Matagorda County, all Mexicans were driven out under the bogus claim that they were wandering indigent subhumans who have no fixed domicile but hang around the plantations talking to the likeliest Negro girls for wives. They often steal horses and these girls too and endeavor to run them to Mexico. By the year 1855, the estimates were that as many as 4,000, 5,000 formerly enslaved Africans had escaped to Mexico. Slaveholders became so alarmed at this trend that they requested and received approximately 1/5 of the standing U.S. Army, which was deployed along the Texas-Mexico border in a vain effort to stem the flow of runaways. The defiant Mexicans stood their ground, refused to return runaways, and continued supporting slave uprisings and providing assistance to escaping slaves. Let me read that again. I don't think the laity heard that. Defiant Mexicans stood their ground and refused to return runaways and continued supporting slave uprisings and providing assistance to escaping slaves. In the words of Felix Haywood, a Texas slave whose experience is recorded in the slave narratives of Texas, sometimes someone would come along and try to get us to run up north and be free. We used to laugh at that. There was no reason to run up north. All we had to do was walk south. And we'd be free as soon as we crossed the Rio Grande, because that was a law. Any slave that set foot in Mexico was freed. Okay? Thanks to the black president of Mexico, Vicente Guerrero, right? But let's read on. So, you got to go to the north. No, you can go to the south. You can go south of the border and become free. What a difference a border made. 1857 was a year whose profound irony made it one of the most interesting. 1857 was the year that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against Dred Scott, an enslaved African who had sued for his freedom on the grounds that his owner had fortified any claim to him after taking him into a free state. Ironically, 1857 was the same year that Mexican Congress adopted Article 13, declaring that an enslaved person was free the moment he set foot on Mexican soil. Mexico as a provider. So the same year they made that law. Mexico as a provider of job opportunities for African Americans. So this is the next segment. During during the 1890s, hundreds of black migrants fed up with slave-like conditions and segregation left Alabama for Mexico and established 10 large colonies. Shortly thereafter, during the period of the Mexican Revolution, large numbers of black people migrated from New Orleans to Tampico, Mexico, as the oil industry prospered. These Africans in Mexico established branches of Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association. One of the black oil workers who came to Tampico stated, "There is no race prejudice. Everyone is treated according to his abilities." During the same period, black heavyweight champion Jack Johnson asserted that Mexico was willing not only to give us the privileges of Mexican citizenship, but also willing to champion our cause. Juan Uribe, a major Mexican official visiting Los Angeles in 1919, was quoted as saying, "My only regret is that it is not physically possible to immediately transport several million African Americans to my beloved Mexico, where the North yields her riches as nowhere else and where people are not disturbed by artificial standards of race or color." See, this colorism wasn't as big as it was now in Mexico. Okay, at one point in time, this was the attitude. It was a haven for quote-unquote African Americans. And I keep saying quote-unquote African Americans because if you're watching this, you're African American, you are a Jew. African American is a pseudonym. Your true race can be traced back to the Jews. Refer to my video, The Jews Are Black 2016, for more information about that. But let's keep going on the Genesis 49ers page. Matter of fact, if you're watching right now and you like the material that I'm bringing out, subscribe, like, and comment. More content like this will be brought out on my channel. Okay, so it says similarly, African-American immigrant Theodore Troy said, "I am going to a land where freedom and opportunity beckon me as well as every other man, woman, and child of dark skin. In this land, there are no Jim Crow laws to feather me. I am not denied opportunity because of the color of my skin, and wonderful undeveloped resources of a country smiled upon by God beckon my genius onto their development." A black colony which included 50 families developed fruit orchards and engaged in cattle raising. It established itself in Baja California in the Santa Clara and Vallecitos Valley, situated between Ensenada and Tecate, approximately 30 miles south of San Diego, and lasted into the 1960s. So this is like a community, a very successful black community in Mexico that nobody talks about. Not to be overlooked is the enormous success of the Negro baseball leagues in Mexico during the 1930s and 1940s. Black ball players, together with 400, 500 family members seeking relief from racism in the U.S. and segregated institutions, were hosted in Mexico by generally respectful competitors and admiring fans. One competitor in particular, Ray Dundridge, played for 18 years in Mexico before the Jackie Robinson gained admission into U.S. Major League Baseball. Also from the 1930s and 1960s, major Mexican muralists such as Diego Rivera, David Siqueiros, and Jose Clemente Orozco's invited prominent African-American artists such as Hale Woodruff, John Biggers, Elizabeth Catlett, and Charles White to the Mexican art school, where they developed an art style which helped them connect images more effectively to ethnic and class struggle. Of course, there are many more historical intersections where Mexican and African people cooperated with each other. A few examples were solidarity between the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Black Panther Party, Brown Berets, we read about that in the last article, SNCC, and Alianza Federal de Pueblos Libres, and el Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, and the Black Student Union. Mike Lyons, a black member of the United Farm Workers Union's national executive, negotiated its contract with Coca-Cola, which owns Minute Maid and sizable Florida orange groves. In Los Angeles during the 90s, black and brown students recognizing common history and mutual interests formed the African and Latino Youth Summit. Admittedly, Vicente Fox is no Vicente Guerrero. The Mexico of today is profoundly different from the refuge that once welcomed fugitive slaves or land of opportunity that embraced African American job seekers. Like the Bible says, many nations have drunk of her cup. Okay, a lot of these nations have been thoroughly polluted with the fascist American system. Yet its beautiful history of support of African Americans in need of allies cannot be erased. It might prove useful to see the relationship between black and brown people as similar to the bond between a man and a woman. It's beautiful most of the time, but there are moments when it's tested and may become strained. And that's what we're going through right now. We have to fix these issues between our two communities so we can join and be cohesive and be a well-oiled engine to get our people where they need to go. We need our own schools. We need our own grocery stores. We need to be self-reliant. And we need each other to become that. Okay? So, continuing on, it says, when this happens, one or both must give more and work to increase our renewed trust. Pass the material on to others. The black or brown reader of this piece should know now that the best of our history together as black and brown people speaks to the necessity of collaborating during the worst of times. A wise people are a grateful people and never content themselves with recalling and celebrating their legendary alliance with an important neighbor. Instead, they press forward fully aware that mutually supportive relationships are still possible and necessary. It's necessary that we join. Ron Wilkins is a former member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and is presently a professor in the Department of Africana Studies at the California State University. Dominguez Hill's special acknowledgement is extended to the historians Rosalie Schwartz, Gerald Horney, Rodolfo Acuna, and Omar Farouk, whose early investigative efforts in the field of African-Mexican collaboration contribute to making this work possible. So that's the end of the article. Like I said, I'm bringing this so we can join. We can break down these walls. I know one video not going to do it. It's going to take a lot of things to come together and collaborate to break this this spell that's over our people. Before I conclude, I want to just bring something to you, to the viewers out there listening. And if I have any black and Latin viewers, this video is especially for you guys so we can tear down these walls and join, unite, and look at the history. Stop looking at cartels or kill black people, or you just feed into the propaganda and what's going on. But this is from the scriptures. Okay? That's another thing. You think the scriptures is, that's the white man's book. No, this is our history, our code of conduct, our laws, our statutes, and our prophecy, our future, our past, and our present. So Jeremiah 50:33, it said, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together." The children of Israel represents you Hispanics. The children of Judah represents the quote-unquote African American, the Jews. Okay? They were oppressed together. If you don't believe they're Jews, they come from Igbos and Yoruba. The Yoruba themselves tell you what? That they're Israelites. The Igbos themselves tell you what? That they're the Jews. Okay, so no more lies. And now we're in Babylon the Great, and they oppress us together. We went through the lynchings. We went through the civil rights era. We went through hell together here in this land, and still are. And it says, and all that took them captives held them fast. Remember what we read earlier? Fast means secure. They wouldn't want to let them go. It said they refused to let them go. What we read earlier about the Anglos, the Northerners, the North Americans, what they do. The Mexicans told the government, okay, that we'll compensate you for your slaves. We're going to free them because in the Mexican Republic, slavery was banned, okay? It wasn't allowed. So they were going to compensate the slave owners. The slave owners wasn't trying to hear it. Why? Because they just want to have control over us. They want to dominate us. And it's written in the scriptures. Like I said, our past, present, and futures in the scriptures. Keep thinking it's a white man book if you want to. It's a mirror. We're looking into this. Every time you open up those scriptures, you're looking into a mirror. It's a reflection of Black, Hispanic, and Native American man, and West African man as well, and woman and child. With that, I'm going to say shalom. Subscribe to the channel for more videos touching on topics like this. We will be bringing this up more and more and more and talking about how we can restore the relationship and renew the trust between blacks and Hispanics on my channel, Genesis 49ers. With that, Genesis 49ers.